tell me about your thoughts on this Eagles story, because I'd love to hear your thoughts on how the Super Bowl turned out.
I think the final score was one of the most misleading final scores that I've ever seen in any game. This was not a 40-22 game. This was a 40-6 game. And I think if there's anybody that's a little unhappy right now in Philadelphia, there aren't many. And listen, overall, I'm sure he's ecstatic. But I know Vic Fangio really well. And trust me, giving up 16 points in the last 4 minutes on his record, that was a 40-6 kind of defensive effort, not a 40-22 game. So I know the ring is the thing, but I also know the mindset of these coaches. I'm sure he cringed giving up a couple of late touchdowns and twos. But it was a beatdown. It was I think one of the 3 or 4 biggest blowouts in the history of the Super Bowl. It never felt competitive to me.
Why do you think it went down this way? I'm so curious because I think that the narrative was so heavily Chiefs leading into this game, the talk about the three-peat, Mahomes every other word. I wonder how much of that affected the Eagles.
I think I'm sure they got tired of hearing about it, but I also think it put weight on the Chiefs, the burden of trying to do that, and then just the weight of trying to go against that defensive front. They got completely manhandled at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the football. I mean, it spoke to Howie Roseman's drafting ability and what they had done in terms of going out and acquiring the talent to have guys up front. Some guys are not even the biggest stars, but Sweat and Williams and, Carter's taking up 2 people. I mean, it was an amazing testament to how you can win if you can win in the trenches.
Well, and that's where, as you know, that's where most games are won or lost, at the line of scrimmage. And I was particularly moved by Saquon's observation in that regard when he said in his first practice with the Eagles, he looked around at the offensive linemen and, this is my word, not his, but essentially he said, wow. The flip side of that is, of course, Jim, Kansas City's problems on the offensive line. We saw it all season. They had to move guards to tackle. They had to play around with the line. How did this happen again to Kansas City, given that they had the same problem a few years ago?
I think there were really issues there all year long, truth be known. And for whatever reason, teams were not able to expose it. I mean, Buffalo didn't produce any kind of real serious threat like what we saw with Philadelphia. You're moving Tooney to the outside. You're bringing Caliendo up. You're starting him, Taylor on the right side when he's not committing pre-snap penalties. He's been a problem. They did not have this situation arrested. And I did the game that you referenced, the Tampa game, where, again, they just got out physical at the line of scrimmage. But it sure felt like that game. So over and over again, I felt like I was watching a game that I had called. But this was worse. This was much worse for Kansas City.
And why do you think it got this way, Jim?
I know it's easy to say this now because everybody asks both of you who's going to win the game, and America loves to talk by the water cooler about who they think is going to win the game. And my stock line was, I think Kansas City, if it wins, will be a close one. But I really believe Philadelphia has the ability to blow them out. So I've heard from some Philadelphia friends who would ask me that question leading up to it, and I told them, I think your team might win in a blowout. I thought that their roster just was that much better. When you have Saquon, you start there. You have 2 great players on the outside, and AJ and Devontae. You got a solid tight end if that's what you want to go to. They didn't have to go to Dallas that often. You've got a really good offensive line. You got a super talented quarterback. And then that defensive line is probably the best in football. They went out and struck gold with Mitchell and DeJean in the secondary. The rookies this year played well beyond their year. I mean, they're loaded, just absolutely loaded. I think it was the best roster in football, and it showed. You do have to let your mind move forward a little bit and say, wow, they're going to have this same roster back next year. They're going to be, they're going to be an overwhelming favorite next year to repeat. They may be the team. I'm going to get carried away here, but maybe they're the team that goes out there and sets the record for the first three-peat.
Ooh.
This team's going to be around. This is they're loaded.
Check out new episodes of What the Football with Suzy Shuster and Amy Trask every Tuesday. Watch us on the Rich Eisen Show YouTube page or follow and listen wherever you get your podcasts.